Comic Boom.
Hey guys, Comic Boom here to review Wonder Woman issue 73. Guys, I apologize for being a little bit behind on my videos this week. It is what it is. Sometimes life happens, work, the whole nine yards. Life is still fantastic and good and everything else. I had a little bit of flash flooding here in my area, so that was fun. But in any event, we don't live in a world where superheroes can come and clean up messes, so that means that sometimes there's going to be a delay in some of my videos. It is what it is. But guys, Steve Orlando is the guest writer in this issue, and I gotta say, this is the best writing from Steve Orlando I've seen in a long time. This is actually a Wonder Woman comic that I wasn't actually shaking my head on. I actually enjoyed this one. It was actually pretty good. I want to give a shout out to the guys at Weird Science DC podcast. Check out Weird Science DC. They also have a website. They reviewed this comic book. They review every DC comic book that comes out. Again, it's Weird Science DC. Check out, type in Weird Science DC, subscribe to their channel, read the reviews every week. They review every DC comic, most of Marvel as well, a lot of indie comics, and they have a podcast as well. Subscribe to their podcast on Patreon. It's really good stuff, fantastic. In any event, I say that not only because Weird Science DC is pretty awesome channel. The guys at the Get Fresh crew are top class. You don't have to agree with everything they say to still enjoy their humor and their reviews. They have got something called the Orlando Zone in their channel where anything written by Steve Orlando is reviewed. And it's quite good. And Steve Orlando has a particular style of writing, and it's hit and miss. And Steve Orlando wrote Justice League America, and while I wasn't a huge fan of it, it had some promise. And Steve Orlando also, he did actually write a couple issues of Wonder Woman. I forget, what was it 5 or 6 issues back, where Wonder Woman got caught in she rescued another a missing Amazon from Tiktakaluk, some crazy god. I couldn't pronounce anything in it. Anyways, it was I wasn't a big fan of it. It was a very poorly written 2-issue series. It was hard to follow. It was hard to make sense of. And I really didn't get much out of it. It was beautifully drawn, but I had a really hard time with it, and I couldn't recommend it. And so I was not looking forward to Steve Orlando writing yet another Wonder Woman comic, but I was wrong. Surprise, surprise, I'm so happy to report that all the language used in here is actually understandable. The names of the characters are actually understandable. They're pronounceable for the most part. So it's very different than Steve Orlando's last attempt to write Wonder Woman, thank God. And Steve Orlando, man, I think he did a good job here. Now, what happened here? We're dealing with the dimension of chi, C-H-I. I think I'm pronouncing it chi. I just finished saying how everything's pronounceable and I can't pronounce it. C-H-I. Is that she? Chi? She? I don't know. Is the C or H silent? I don't know. But it's dimension chi. And what dimension chi is well, let me just back up here. Basically, Wonder Woman has Wonder Woman along with Maggie are trying to find Olympus, and they ended up in this small Midwestern town where they ran into Atlantiades, who is Aphrodite's daughter/son. She's a transgender, a gender fluid god called Atlantiades, who basically mind raped the town into pursuing their heart's desire, heart's content. That little kerfuffle was dealt with. You can hear my rant about that on previous reviews. Suffice to say, at the end of that, Wonder Woman and Maggie ended up in this cave where they believe, where they're basically attacked by this Minotaur, and they defeat that, and they believe that the sword, Maggie's sword, which is actually Antiope's sword, is actually leading them to where they believe the Amazons to be, or at least where potentially even Olympus is. So Atlantiades, Wonder Woman, and Maggie end up in this cave, and they end up defeating the Minotaur last issue, and now they're in this new dimension called Chi. Now, why does Wonder Woman recognize dimension Chi? Well, she recognizes it because she was there when she was a young child. Now, what dimension Chi is, what dimension Chi actually is that it's actually a product of Hippolyta's, Wonder Woman's mother, Hippolyta's imagination. It's sort of linked to Hippolyta's imagination. And essentially what a dimension chi is It's created essentially to test you. And Wonder Woman basically tells the story. This entire comic book, this entire issue is Wonder Woman explaining to Maggie and explaining to Atlantiades what Dimension Chi is and what her past experience in Dimension Chi was. And what that experience was is when she was a young girl, she ended up in Dimension Chi with her mother, Hippolyta, and they had an adventure there. Because what had happened is that they had an adventure there. They were actually captured by Amazons, which were a darker counterpart to Hippolyta. And Hippolyta basically, because Dimension Chi was premised upon and created from essentially Hippolyta's imagination, Hippolyta dealt with her darker self, a darker self that chose not to have a daughter. So Wonder Woman met a blonde version of her mother, a blonde Hippolyta, that chose not to have a daughter, and chose instead to dedicate herself to ruling Themyscira. And that change and shift, that shift in that choice was pivotal, because this is a darker version of Hippolyta. And in this story involves a young Diana being essentially imprisoned while her mother Hippolyta confronts her darker sort of doppelganger Hippolyta, and trying to convince her counterpart to basically let them go, and basically maybe to give up their more warmongering ways. And it involves an attack by Queen Atomia of the microscopic or the microverse realm. And it's kind of funny because it's a one-shot story. It's basically a self-contained story, which it's pretty good. Steve Orlando's the writer. Aaron Lapestri is the guest artist. He did really good. Matt Ryan is the guest inker, and Romula Fujita Jr. is the colorist. He's always amazing on his coloring. Fantastic job in the coloring. And Pat Buzo is the letterer. And Jesus Marino and Romula Fujita Jr. do the cover, which is also really, really good. On the cover here, it might look like an older version of Diana, but it's in fact, in the comic book itself, it is actually a younger version of Diana. And what's empowering about it, what I like about it, is that it's actually a younger version of Diana that wins the day. As her mother, Hippolyta, and the blonde version of Hippolyta are fighting and bickering with each other and battling the forces of Atomia, which are attacking the dimension, the Chi dimension. Wonder Woman, basically, young Diana wins the day by helping to defeat the forces of Queen Atomia. Now, the only reason the forces of Queen Atomia are even attacking the blonde Hippolyta and the Amazons in the first place is because they started it first. Queen Blonde Hippolyta attacked first. They attacked the quantum realm. They discovered the quantum realm in their scientific investigations, and they discovered the atomic realm, the Atomia's microscopic universe, and they attacked it. And so they were just really defending themselves by having an offensive attack. And this really was, it embodied something that Wonder Woman has always done, and this was one of her first times doing it at a young age, and that is she broke up a war, she defeated the enemy, and then she showed mercy to the enemy, which is what you have to do. And I thought it was well done. The art here was really good. And as Wonder Woman herself says, young Diana says to Atomia, who believes that the Amazons now are going to make them grovel in defeat. She says, I'd have you stand instead, Atomia. You fought for what was right. Respect your enemies and redefine them. And that, to me, I really like that line. So I got to give Steve Orlando credit. I really liked it here. Now, I've often been a critic of various writers of Wonder Woman, where when they sort of do the cliche thing and they go off in a very predictable manner. And I will say about this is that while there is some degree of predictability about the story, I really like the dialogue here, and I can't believe I'm saying that about something that Steve Orlando has written. But he's done a really good job here, and I think that's the way that Diana says that, respect your enemies and redefine them, is very, very crucial. And it's really a good lesson in these divisive political times as well, I must say, and I really like that. Queen Atomia thought that she wasn't going to be shown mercy because even though they were attacked first, Queen Atomia did then attack attack Dimension Chi, and they weren't expecting mercy. They were expecting to be made to grovel, to be made to beg, but that's not what happened. Inspired by young Diana's example of defeating them and showing them respect and hoping to redefine them, even the blonde Queen Hippolyta herself was inspired by that, to basically show mercy and let Atomia go relieve the realm of Dimension Chi in peace. And I think that's quite telling. Now, at the end of this, of course, older Diana, Wonder Woman, is telling this story to Maggie and Atlantiades, and essentially trying to convey to them that, look, Dimension Chi is a product of my mother's imagination. It was a testing ground. It was basically a way of sort of testing Hippolyta, so Hippolyta could confront a version of herself that chose not to have a daughter, chose not to have Diana. And because it was something that Hippolyta always struggled with when she was a young queen. She wanted to have a daughter, but she was always struggling. Should I have a daughter, or should I focus on being a queen? Should I have a daughter, or should I focus on being a queen? Can I do both? And of course, she made the right decision. And that experience in Dimension Chi helped Hippolyta come to terms with the fact that she made the right decision by having a daughter, especially when that daughter ends up being as wise and as powerful and as full of integrity as Wonder Woman ultimately is proven to be. And that's what makes it so. That's what makes the story really good. I like the idea of Dimension Chi being a testing ground. I think that this is a great dimension that the rest of the DC universe can utilize, because I think of all the potential that Dimension Chi, that other heroes of the DC universe can end up in Dimension Chi and also face their own test. And I think that's really good. It's a cool concept. Dimension Chi is a really cool concept that I hope that the rest of the DC universe and the other writers of the DC universe pick up upon. Because whenever a hero is struggling with a personal demon or a personal question that is causing them to doubt themselves, an adventure in Dimension Chi might be what is called for to help them see the righteousness or the wrongness of the particular path that they're on. So I think it's a really good, I think it's a great story in that respect with a lot of potential. And it basically ends, that's how it ends. The story proper, the main story that J. Willow Wilson is telling in terms of moving toward trying to find the Amazons, trying to find Olympus, that's still not resolved. That's going to continue. They're in Dimension Chi, and the fact that they're in Dimension Chi at the end of this cave, is this where the Amazons are? Wonder Woman thinks that perhaps they're going to get closer. Maybe they are closer to finding her mother, her Hippolyta. We're not really sure, but it's very interesting that this Dimension Chi that Wonder Woman has never had experienced before since when she was very, very young, for it to suddenly appear while they're looking for Olympus is rather interesting, and for it to appear right after that massive explosion that essentially made Olympus disappear. Remember that it was when Grail swung at Ares with the God-Killer sword, that there was this explosion. Ares suddenly, all the gods of Olympus were supposedly, I guess, sort of almost like reborn, or at least displaced. What happened to Olympus? What happened to Themyscira? We still don't know yet. The mystery is still there, so I'm still interested in seeing where this is going, and it's nice to see a story here that actually makes a little bit more sense and was a little bit more entertaining than what we've been getting so far. So thank you, Steve Orlando. You've elevated a little bit up on my opinion list in terms of the quality of your writing, and that's all I got to say about this issue, guys. Tell me what you think of Wonder Woman issue 73. Hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter at Metropolis40. Check out Weird Science DC website and podcast on Patreon. And until next time, Comic Boom out.